Before you dive into another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast, we wanted to let you know about our new Girls in Marketing membership course.
Hey, I'm Ellie, the founder of Write and Sunny, a copywriting and social media management agency. I've recently worked with Girls in Marketing to co-create a copywriting course to help you unleash your inner copywriter.
This course is exclusively available to Girls in Marketing members, so all you need to do is make sure you're signed up and use the code COPY10 for 10% off our annual membership.
Hi, I'm Olivia.
And I'm Amy.
And this is the Girls in Marketing podcast. Every week, we release a new episode that you won't want to miss. Our guests are industry experts with amazing experiences, so you'll always come away with new nuggets of wisdom. From educational and inspiring episodes covering the latest in digital marketing to casual and fun chats with the Girls in Marketing team, unpacking marketing myths and trends, we've got it all.
Here at Girls in Marketing, we're all about empowering and supporting women to be the best marketers they can be through our online learning platform and community. Check out our resources and membership to get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle.
Right, let's dive into an episode together. Hello and welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. Welcome back to another snack episode. Today, we are delighted to be joined by a guest. Holly Clark is Digital Media Executive at CultureShift. She's going to be chatting with us all about workplace culture today. So, first things first, let's talk about red flags let's go with the hiring process, because I think that's something that we've had a lot of discussions on our Instagram stories on recently. So, red flags with the hiring process.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one that we've spoken about before. We kind of do these talkative Tuesdays on our Instagram where we ask our community to get engaged in conversations, and these types of topics always get so many people kind of sharing their thoughts on what is good and what's not in the hiring process. One thing that comes up really frequently, and it's specifically pertaining to job descriptions and kind of job ads, is when job advertisements leave off salaries. And I think that now in this day and age that it's just not really, it's not really a thing. I don't think we should be doing it. I think the least that you can do is put a salary range, because there will be a salary range that you're willing to pay. And I think that just you should respect people enough to give them that information before they take the time to kind of apply for a job with you, because they're wasting their time if it's not a salary that is going to kind of be right for them. So that's one that comes up a lot, definitely, isn't it?
Yeah, I did a LinkedIn post recently because we've actually had a few brands in the past that we've declined job postings to on our jobs board because they refuse to disclose a salary or a salary range. And I did a post recently that was kind of addressing the fact that they didn't and they weren't willing to even put a range on, and it actually went not really viral these days because viral's like a lot more, but it got like a few thousand likes and people were agreeing. And I think there's this massive notion now where what's the point in not posting a salary, because otherwise you're not going to get the right sort of candidates, and it's just a waste of time for everyone, really, isn't it? Let's be honest. And I think that people, when you do post a salary, people see that and they're like, yeah, actually, I feel like I'm in that range. And, addressing that is, I think, a big thing really for some companies.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that like you spot within that job description kind of and think that is a red flag, that is a red flag, that is a red flag. But it's like, how many of them red flags do you look past? Because I don't know, like I feel I've spoke to a lot of people recently that have said, if a job doesn't contain a salary, like they're not applying to it, which for them brands that are advertising and like putting the job out there and they're not putting a range out there, like there's so many lost applicants and good quality applicants as well that they're losing from not doing that. But yeah, another one for me, and a lot of the responses on our Instagram stories when we did talk about this was like bad-mouthing managers or bad-mouthing like past employees in the interview process, or just in general workplace culture, because I think that's a massive red flag. And you, like someone who's coming in for an interview, if you're bad-mouthing in front of them, you dread to think what is going to happen when you go into that company, don't you? So yeah, that's a massive one for me.
Yeah, definitely.
I think my number one point for anybody interviewing and looking for a new job and stuff, when they're in an interviewing process with managers, ask them, like always ask questions at the end, like never just say I got no questions, but ask like, what's your workplace culture like? And you can tell like from vibe, from what they say, like 100% like it comes across in an interview, like what they're saying and what their culture's like.
Yeah.
And it shows that you prioritize that as well. Like if you go in there and like, what is your workplace culture like? What do you like about the company? What are your values? Like it shows that that's a priority for you.
Yeah.
And you know, we've said before, it's such a privilege to be able to pick a place based on red flags.
Of course.
Yeah.
But younger like candidates, especially in marketing now, people aren't taking, you know, they want to work for somewhere that has a good culture and that has green flags and that cares about them. Like,
Yeah.
And
Would you say then you think it would be a good idea, obviously encouraging people to ask those questions when they go for interview, but from the other side, like the employer side, would you say it would be good for them to build into their interviewing process, like proactively talking about their culture with candidates when they come in? So, you know, kind of rather than waiting to be asked about it, actually telling them and kind of including that on job descriptions and when they're interviewing and stuff as well.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think for businesses as well, like a big part of future-proofing your business, you know, talking really corporate here, like catering to younger audiences and the future talent is so important.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's this big thing at the moment in the news about like Gen Z this and millennial that, and they aren't taking this and they're not happy with how corporate is because they expect more. Like the world's changing. We want more. We want better environments to work in. Like you have to, in order to future-proof your business, you have to care.
Yeah.
Literally, you have to like put an effort in mental health and having green flags and, you know, all these things on not necessarily just job descriptions, but in everything that you do, like you have to stay with the times.
Yeah.
And younger audiences and younger talent want more. And
I think that's could ever only be a good thing. Like I've heard so many people might be an over-exaggeration, but very few people say like of kind of high profile names kind of say like Gen Z are lazy or like Gen Z are picky or whatever, and it's like, well no, it's like we're identifying them red flags, we're like calling them red flags out, and that can only be a good thing surely, like holding businesses responsible for exposing the culture, exposing like the salary ranges and stuff. Like it can only be a good thing in my opinion.
Exactly. And businesses shouldn't see it as a threat. They shouldn't see it as something that, you know, is a threat to them and, oh, well, you know, their expectations are too high. They should see it as an opportunity to actually say, how can we meet these expectations? What can we do as an organisation to better ourselves from a culture perspective, and make sure that if we know that that's what, you know, Gen Z or millennials or whoever are demanding, how can we make sure that we're doing that and preempt it?
Yeah. So some green flags then in like the interview process, for example, things that we should look out for. Have we got any kind of green flags? So obviously Holly mentioned actively, like from an employer perspective, talking about culture, you know, making sure that that's kind of embedded. I definitely think for me, making sure that you talk about like progression, but not necessarily in a way where it's like you can get to manager in, you know, 2 years or something like that, but say, you know, we really value progression and we want you to progress within this role, within the company. And, you know, at the interview stage, you may not have an exact plan for that person to say, you know, this is where you can be in X amount of years. But even just positively speaking about progression, because I've had it before in the past where it's just like, oh yeah, you know, we want to hire for this role because we just really need it right now, and that's it, full stop. And it's a bit like, well, what, we need it right now, okay, but where does that leave me in X amount of years?
Yeah.
I think that's a positive thing for me. Like a green flag would be those people speaking about those things in the interview process, like the progression.
Yeah. And I think, again, in the hiring process, brands or, you know, companies taking a genuine interest in you and why you want to do what you've applied to do and what you see your progression being. So them talking to you about what progression opportunities they might have as an organisation, but understanding what you are looking for progression wise, and it being like a mutual thing, you know, mutually beneficial. And I think another thing that can be a red flag kind of coming out of the hiring process and into being in the world of work is when those two things don't match up. When you go through the hiring process and, you know, the job description isn't what you end up doing for a job, and all of the benefits and perks that they talk about don't actually materialise, and they act and talk about this culture that they have, and then you actually realise when you start there that it's just not the case and people are really demotivated and it's just all a bit of a facade. That's really a kind of a huge red flag, but unfortunately that's something that often you can't identify until you actually get into the workplace, and then it's kind of like, okay, now make a decision about what you do from there. But you know, I think unfortunately there's not much you can do in kind of, you know, there can be all the green flags in the world in the hiring process, and then if you start and they're not there, then that's a bit of a shame.
I think it's just about communication, isn't it? If you're currently in a job that maybe is showing some, you know, red flags, they're not speaking about progression, or they're not actively like helping you be the best person or the best professional that you can be. I think it's about just open communication. And obviously, again, it's coming from a place of privilege, isn't it, really? And the fact that you're able to go to a manager or something and speak to them. But for me, I think it's about having that open line of communication where it's, you know, at the moment, I'm really struggling to see where I'm progressing in the next 2 years. You know, can we maybe have a meeting about this? Can we, you know, speak one-to-one, and just pulling aside, you know, your manager and speaking about that? Because obviously there will be a lot of people potentially listening that are in that position right now. And again, it is a privilege, but sometimes it's about you advocating for yourself. You know, I absolutely love it when, you know, leaders and managers advocate for the team, but sometimes it's not always going to be the case. You've got to advocate for yourself, which I think goes back to the point that you kind of made, Holly, earlier, which was Gen Z and kind of the younger generation really wanting to get like more involved and being really up for things, you know. And I know you mentioned, Kira, some people talking about Gen Z being really lazy. I just think it's high standards, isn't it?
Yeah. And from your perspective, Holly, from, you know, your work at CultureShift with different brands and stuff, I'd be interested to know what are some of the biggest shifts, I guess, that kind of, you know, people in the working world are kind of demanding and are looking for and do need to take place in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge question. But okay, so from people, mental health is huge. And I think not only just like we care about mental health or like a mission statement or what they put on social media, but like living and breathing that. And I do think a red flag in itself, again, a privileged red flag, is being able to see. For me, like a company can talk about mental health all day on social media, you know, mental health awareness day, this and that. But what are they doing if you can't get out of bed that day? What are you doing? What are they doing if you can't get out of bed that day? What are they doing if you have ADHD? What are they doing if a family member's died? Like, all these things make us human. And it's funny that we talk about businesses, they run by people. Like everybody, you know, death in a family is not unusual for anybody, unfortunately. In our working life, we'll all go through it. But what is your employer doing to be a human in that? And they may put something on social media around mental health, but what are they doing day to day? So something at CultureShift we have is like, we have mental health days. So there's like roughly like 5-6 a year, you can take a mental health day. We call them wellbeing days. And it's like, no questions asked, a day you can't get out of bed, you're struggling, it's an anniversary of a family death, like you have bad periods, you can have a wellbeing day. And that to me is an example of actually practicing what you preach in terms of like wellbeing. What's another one? Again, in terms of, and I know you've talked about it on the podcast before, in terms of like diversity, inclusion in hiring, like, again, not just putting stuff on social media, not just virtue signaling, but what are you doing to make sure you're hiring diversely, and not only hiring diversely, but retaining that talent? Because hiring diversely is like the first step in the process. Like, what are you doing to keep them? Because you can't expect in a culture, like, if you have a certain culture and it's a dominant culture with men in suits, and then you say, right, we want to start hiring diversely, and you start doing that, but that culture isn't, that they don't belong in that. What are you doing to make other people belong?
To actually change the culture for those people to enter into, so that they feel welcome and feel part of that culture, and then they actually then want to stay.
Exactly. And that's another thing, like feeling like you belong. I think in workplaces, especially in corporate, the word belonging is like a big buzzword right now. Like
family.
Family, another one. I know, like family, like we're a family. And I don't like that. I think it's hard because I think when you get on and you have a good culture, like it's quite easy to use the word family. But it's funny when at the moment we're hiring and I'm like, never say that word. Like, we're like a family. Because it's just, it's not. We're not. We are a workplace. Like, we get on and we respect each other and we have an amazing time and we do work around great things and making the world a better place. But yeah, I agree. Like the word family, I know you've mentioned it before.
I think there's a difference, isn't there, between like a family who, yes, go through hardships as a workplace would. I think that it's different because you would never have to give like bad feedback to, your mum or someone like that. So I think that there is a big difference. And I do think sometimes that businesses think that family is like a positive word. So yeah, anyone out there listening, do not use family in your hiring process.
And don't give bad feedback to your mum.
Yeah, don't do that either. I mean, I don't know your mum, but they might not take it well. But I think definitely kind of what you were saying, Holly, definitely resonates. And I think it's all kind of comes back to that sort of performative versus like the actual actions that you're taking, doesn't it? And how those two things marry up, because it's all well and good to take a really big stance on particular days of the year around mental health or around International Women's Day or whatever. But what are you doing actually throughout the year internally to support your employees that actually demonstrate that these issues are not just one day of the year issues? And I think that really, it probably feels worse for those employees when you do shout about it on one day and then they're sitting there thinking, but you don't do anything throughout the year to actually action this. And it probably feels like such a jarring experience for them, doesn't
And
it?
I think as marketers, again, because marketers could be the one putting those messages out there and feeling very differently.
It's it's like when the gender pay gap bot comes around, isn't it? We've had like a lot of people in our community have said, like, spoke to us about how to go about it, because it's like the social media manager isn't in charge of this pay gap that's going on in a massive corporation, but the social media manager is who is going to get kind of the brunt of it, and it's not going to touch them other people. So it's like, it's hard because it's like, just trying to know who to get that message to, isn't it? And how you get that message to them.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes as well, it's kind of hard because there will be businesses out there that, do need to make some sort of shift. And often it starts with the people at the top, 100%. And, if there is anyone who's listening that is kind of, a CEO or a founder, I think it definitely starts with them. But I also do think sometimes it's just about talking yourself and actually bringing those things up yourself. There's been a lot of things previously for me that I've brought up and said, I feel like this needs to, change. Even if we think about mental health, for example, if you are in a position where you feel you can, saying, it'd be really great if there was more mental health support. It'd be really great if we had something that was for, physical health or anything like that. Obviously not, again, I understand not everyone's in that position, but sometimes it does start with you. If you are in that position and you do feel like you can speak to a manager, just say, it'd be really good if we had, a training budget, or it'd be really good if we had, more mental health support. Like, I'm really struggling. And I think it takes that one kind of person to be that shift sometimes. And I know it's not always the case, but often as well, it's hard. And, as a founder and CEO, they may, if someone comes to them and says, we're really struggling at the moment, they might go, oh God, I didn't even realise. I know that seems stupid, but they might just say, didn't even realise. Yeah, let's do it. Let's, let's help you. That sort of thing.
It just takes that one conversation. I think as well, like if you are in a position where you have access to the good workplace culture, or you have access to that mental health support, or you have access to all these range of benefits that actually really do support you as an employee, I think shouting about that, obviously from a privileged place, but shouting about that and raising awareness about that and how that helps you as an employee. We all know how like viral LinkedIn can go right now, and like how the reach on there is massive. So I think shouting about that and raising awareness, because you never know, it might catch the attention of a CEO from wherever who thinks, I'm actually going to start implementing that for my employees, and then it kind of has that domino effect. So I think it's that raising awareness of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's not, I think one thing that it shouldn't be is that it shouldn't always be on the responsibility of the people who need the support, which obviously I totally agree, Liv. I think, if you think you need support, raise awareness, because sometimes people just genuinely aren't aware. But I think that like from like a leader's perspective, I think, obviously as a leader, you're never going to have experienced everything that all of your team have experienced. You just physically won't have. You won't have experienced all of the potential kind of mental health struggles that they've experienced. You won't necessarily be from the same background or face any of the same struggles. But I think it's about being aware of those things, and I guess educating yourself on how you can support people from that perspective. I don't know if that's something, Holly, that you guys focus on at CultureShift, and like if you've got any recommendations about how people can go about kind of educating themselves on, I guess, issues like that to make themselves more aware and able to identify things.
Yeah, I think the first thing is when you said about leaders, like the higher up you go, the less in touch with the problems and the reality you are. And I think for leaders, actively putting in spaces and putting in spaces that give employees the ability to give feedback.
Yeah.
And I mean, check out CultureShift's resources site. But in terms of, what do you mean? Like in terms of like going about finding?
Yeah, I just think how can, I guess, we educate ourselves more on issues that don't necessarily affect us, but from the perspective of how we can support others. I think that's a very broad question. I think it's a difficult one.
I mean, first things first, I always think follow people on LinkedIn, on social media platforms that don't look like you. Like widen your circles. The beautiful thing about social media is we can engage with so many different people we would never meet.
Yeah.
Finding this community, for example. First of all, like find people and follow them who don't look like you, who don't have similar experiences to you.
Yeah.
You're listening to a podcast right now, go listen to a podcast by a woman in a business, by a Black woman in a business, by people in marketing who are in different organizations than you. Like, there's so much material out there, like in terms of educating yourself. Like Netflix has an amazing array of different series to all learn about these different things. And it's fun. It's not boring. Like there's so many different things that you can watch. Like for starters, like watch Queer Eye if you want to learn more about the queer community. It's an amazing series. I love it. Like, and I'm not in the queer community, but I still love that.
Yeah.
And
I think there's
lots
definitely
of things like that.
Yeah, there's just definitely no excuse. I think, like you just said, there's so many ways to engage with, different people from all sorts of different backgrounds. There's no excuse, I think, to kind of shy away from informing yourself of different ways that you can support different people.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a leader, it's your responsibility. I think as a leader and a manager, like you're in that position, you're in that job, it's your responsibility to learn about people.
Yeah.
Like, so do the work.
Yeah. Well, it's been a very interesting episode. Thank you for joining us, Holly.
Thank you for having me.
It's been
it's been
such
nice
a
to
good
chat.
one. And I think, for everyone out there, the key takeaways really is just, we are this generation of amazing people who just are doing really great things. And sometimes it's about identifying the red flags and green flags and, don't beat yourself up about it if you can't find those things or something happens. I think it is just about like educating yourself in the future. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. We love hearing from you, so if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review to let us know your thoughts and make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button to be the first to hear when our new episodes released. Don't forget, if you want to get involved with Girls in Marketing, check out our membership to join our incredible community of marketers. Think marketing resources, courses, webinars, and more. Find out more on our website or drop us a message on any of our social channels @Girls in Marketing.